The mansion, with its glittering chandeliers and endless corridors, seemed untouchable from the outside. People driving past would look at its tall gates and whisper about the fortune that lay behind them. But inside those walls, life was not as perfect as outsiders believed. Daniel, the millionaire, carried a reputation of power and influence. Businessmen bowed to him, magazines printed his photos, and society women envied the ring that adorned Victoria's finger. Yet Daniel's world was quietly crumbling from within. His father, Mr. William, once a respected man, was now bedridden. The illness had robbed him of his strength, leaving him weak and dependent. Daniel, despite his wealth, couldn't give his father the one thing he needed most, consistent love and presence. That role, surprisingly, had been taken up by Clara, a maid who worked quietly in the background. She didn't wear jewels, she didn't have an education in nursing, but she carried something rarer, genuine care. Every day, Clara sat by Mr. William's side, speaking to him as though he were her own father. She wiped his tears when pain became unbearable, and she sang softly when nights grew too long. The bond between them grew stronger than blood itself. Victoria, however, saw it differently. To her, Clara was overstepping her role. "She's just a maid," Victoria often muttered under her breath. Daniel had been blind to this dynamic for months, distracted by business trips and Victoria's endless demands for attention. But fate would soon open his eyes in ways he never imagined. One evening, Daniel returned unexpectedly early. The mansion was quiet, except for faint whispers coming from his father's room. He approached carefully, the door slightly ajar. Inside, he saw Clara holding his father's trembling hands, whispering, "Don't worry, sir. I am here. You're not alone." The kindness in her voice pierced Daniel's heart. He had never seen his father smile that way in months. Daniel leaned against the wall, listening silently. For the first time, he noticed the contrast, how Clara's presence brought light, while Victoria's absence left only shadows. Later that night, Victoria entered the room briefly. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of medicine and sighed loudly. "This is so depressing. Daniel should just hire more nurses. Why waste my time here?" Her words cut deeper than a knife. Daniel stood in the hallway, frozen, realizing just how cold her heart truly was. The following days confirmed his suspicions. Whenever Clara entered the room, Mr. William's face brightened. Whenever Victoria appeared, his eyes grew heavy with sadness. Victoria's jealousy grew as she saw how much trust Clara had earned. She confronted her one afternoon, snapping, "You think you're special. You're nothing but help." Clara remained calm, her hands folded respectfully. "I don't think I'm special. I just know he deserves kindness." Victoria scoffed, but Daniel, who overheard this exchange, felt a strange fire awaken inside him. He was beginning to see Clara not just as an employee, but as someone extraordinary. To test Victoria, Daniel told her that his father's health was failing and asked if she would help. Her answer was cruel. "Daniel, he's old. It's natural. Focus on us instead of wasting energy." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He replayed Clara's words and Victoria's dismissal in his mind. The difference between the two women couldn't be clearer. Then came the breaking point. Daniel overheard Victoria on a call, laughing with a friend. "Once the old man dies, I'll make Daniel sell the mansion. We'll travel the world with his fortune. Finally, freedom." Daniel clenched his fists, his heart pounding with fury. This was no fiancé, this was a predator. Not long after, a stormy night revealed everything. Victoria entered Mr. William's room and snapped at Clara for pretending to be family. Mr. William tried to speak but coughed violently. Clara shielded him, saying, "Don't you dare raise your voice at him." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "Stay in your place. You are nothing." Daniel finally stepped forward, his voice steady but cold. "No, Victoria. She is everything you're not." Victoria's eyes widened as she spun around. "Daniel, you're defending her." "I'm defending what's right," Daniel replied firmly. "This engagement is over. Pack your things. You're leaving me for a maid." She spat venomously. Daniel's eyes were filled with disappointment. "I'm leaving you because you have no heart. Clara has more dignity in her kindness than you ever had in your love." Victoria stormed out, slamming the door, her ego shattered. But Daniel felt strangely free, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Clara, however, was overwhelmed. "Sir, I never meant to cause problems," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "You didn't cause them, Clara. You revealed them." In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the mansion changed. Daniel began spending more time with his father, often joining Clara in her caregiving. They shared meals, stories, and laughter that had been missing for years. Outsiders, however, began to gossip. "The millionaire is spending more time with the maid than with his fiancée," they whispered. "Has he lost his mind?" But Daniel no longer cared what society thought. For the first time, he felt he was living with truth instead of illusion. Meanwhile, Victoria wasn't ready to give up. She returned one evening, dressed in luxury, tears in her eyes. "Daniel, I made a mistake. Please forgive me." Daniel listened silently, then replied, "You didn't make a mistake, Victoria. You revealed who you truly are. And I cannot unsee it." Victoria's voice turned sharp. "You'll regret this. She's beneath you." Daniel stepped closer, his voice calm but powerful. "The only thing beneath me is greed, and I've already let it go." Victoria left once more, defeated, her threats echoing in the cold night. She never returned again. Meanwhile, Daniel's bond with Clara deepened. He admired how she never sought recognition, how she remained humble even as his father called her his guardian angel. One evening, Mr. William looked at Daniel and whispered, "Son, you were blind, but now you see. Cherish the one who cares when no one else does." Daniel nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. He finally understood what his father meant. The mansion, once filled with emptiness, was now alive with warmth. Laughter echoed through the halls again. Meals were shared like a family, not like strangers living under one roof. Clara became more than a maid, she became part of the household, respected and cherished. Daniel began seeing her not through the lens of status, but through the truth of her heart. The city outside continued to whisper, "A millionaire choosing a maid. Impossible." But Daniel smiled whenever he heard such words. Impossible was exactly what had become his reality. For he had discovered something rare: love that wasn't purchased, loyalty that wasn't forced, and kindness that wasn't conditional. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Daniel said quietly to Clara, "You've given me more than I ever deserved. You've given me a reason to believe again." Clara lowered her eyes, humbled. "I only did what anyone should do." Daniel smiled. "That's what makes you extraordinary. Because not everyone would." Answer: the story of a millionaire, a maid, and a sick father wasn't just about wealth or betrayal. It was about truth, redemption, and the power of compassion. What happened next was indeed unbelievable, because in a world obsessed with riches, Daniel chose a heart over gold, and that made him richer than ever before. The grand mansion of Mr. Donovan, a self-made millionaire, stood as a symbol of wealth and power. Behind the golden gates and polished marble floors, however, there were secrets buried deep within the household that no one dared to uncover. In the quiet rooms of the mansion, Mr. Donovan's aging father, Mr. Harold, was battling illness. His health had deteriorated so much that he barely left his bed. Most of the staff avoided his room, but one young maid, Clara, was always there by his side. She made sure he was fed, comfortable, and treated with dignity. Clara was not just a maid in the Donovan household, she had a kind heart that couldn't ignore suffering. Every morning before the rest of the staff began their chores, she would quietly bring soup to Harold, adjust his pillows, and whisper gentle words to him as though he were her own family. What Clara didn't know was that her devotion to the old man would soon put her in the center of a storm that would change the Donovan family forever. Mr. Donovan, busy with business, rarely spent time at home. He believed his fiancée, Vanessa, a glamorous woman known for her charm, was looking after his father. He had no idea that Vanessa's intentions were far from noble. Vanessa disliked Harold. She saw him as a burden, an obstacle standing between her and the wealth she was desperate to control. Whenever Donovan was away, she made excuses to stay out of Harold's room, often leaving him alone for hours without care. But Clara never turned her back. She noticed when Harold coughed, when he couldn't reach his glass of water, and when he trembled in pain. Her compassion made her risk her job, because if Vanessa found out Clara was taking a role that wasn't hers, it could mean dismissal. One evening, a storm raged outside. The mansion was dimly lit, and most of the staff had retired early. Clara stayed late in Harold's room, reading to him softly from one of his old favorite novels. Harold smiled faintly, whispering, "You remind me of the daughter I never had." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. She never expected recognition for her efforts, but his words touched her soul. At that very moment, Donovan walked into the hallway outside his father's room. He had returned from a sudden business trip earlier than expected. As he approached, he overheard Clara's soft voice and his father's weak reply. Curious, Donovan pushed the door open slightly and peered in. What he saw shook him. His maid, Clara, kneeling by his father's bedside, holding his hand with deep care, while his fiancée Vanessa was nowhere to be found. For several minutes, Donovan stayed hidden, observing. Clara wiped sweat from Harold's brow, adjusted his blanket, and even whispered a prayer. It was genuine, heartfelt care, something Donovan had never seen Vanessa offer. The realization struck him like lightning. All this time, Vanessa had been telling him that she was taking care of his father, assuring him everything was under control. Yet here was the truth: his fiancée had lied, and it was Clara who had been protecting the old man all along. Donovan's fists clenched as he thought of the countless times Vanessa had dismissed his concerns, painting Harold as too weak to even notice neglect. Rage boiled inside him, but he chose to stay silent for the moment. The next morning, Donovan decided to test Vanessa. Over breakfast, he casually asked her how his father had spent the previous night. Without hesitation, Vanessa smiled and said, "Oh, I sat with him for hours, making sure he was comfortable." Donovan's heart sank, but his mind hardened. The lie was blatant, cruel, and calculated. He didn't reveal what he knew yet. Instead, he began quietly observing, determined to uncover the full truth. Over the following days, Donovan noticed a pattern. Every time he asked Vanessa about his father, she painted stories of care and attention. But whenever Donovan checked the surveillance cameras or slipped into the hallway, it was always Clara attending to Harold. Clara, completely unaware she was being watched, continued her acts of kindness. She sang softly to Harold, made sure his medicines were taken, and even sacrificed her own breaks to stay with him. One afternoon, Harold's health took a sharp turn. He struggled to breathe, his chest heaving painfully. Clara rushed to his side, frantically calling for help. Vanessa, who had been lounging in the living room scrolling through her phone, rolled her eyes and muttered, "He'll be fine." Clara didn't stop. She called the doctor, fetched water, and stayed by Harold's side until his breathing stabilized. In that moment, Donovan walked in and saw everything unfold before his eyes. He could no longer contain himself. "Vanessa," he thundered, "why weren't you there when my father needed you?" Startled, Vanessa stammered, I didn't know it was serious." Clara was already there. "That's the point," Donovan snapped. "Clara, a maid, showed more love and humanity than you, the woman who claimed to care about this family." Vanessa's face drained of color. For the first time, she realized Donovan had discovered her lies. Clara froze, terrified she had overstepped her role. She expected Donovan to fire her for interfering, but instead, he turned to her with gratitude in his eyes. "Clara," he said softly, "you saved my father. You've done more for him than anyone else." The room fell silent. Vanessa tried to speak, but Donovan cut her off. "I can't be with someone who sees my family as a burden. Our engagement is over." Tears of fury filled Vanessa's eyes as she stormed out of the mansion, her dreams of wealth shattered. Donovan then turned to Clara, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. From this day forward, you are not just a maid in this house, you are family." Clara's eyes widened. She had never expected kindness in return for her silent sacrifices. Days turned into weeks, and Harold's health slowly improved under Clara's continued care. Donovan visited his father more often now, inspired by Clara's devotion. He realized money could buy luxury, but it could never buy genuine loyalty and love. As time passed, Clara's role in the Donovan household transformed. She was no longer seen as just an employee, she was recognized as the guardian angel who had protected the family when no one else would. The story of Clara and her selfless care spread among the staff, then throughout Donovan's circle of acquaintances. People began to see Donovan not as a cold millionaire but as a man who had rediscovered the true meaning of family. Vanessa, on the other hand, disappeared from their lives. Some whispered she had moved on to another wealthy man, but Donovan no longer cared. He had learned his lesson. True love and loyalty are not found in appearances but in actions. Harold often held Clara's hand, telling anyone who visited, "This young woman saved my life." Those words filled Clara's heart with joy and pride. One evening, as the sunset bathed the mansion in golden light, Donovan approached Clara in the garden. "You've changed my perspective on everything," he said. "You showed me what it means to care, to be human, and to love without expecting anything in return." Clara blushed, unsure how to respond. Donovan continued, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: you will always have a place in my life and in this home." And in that moment, the story of a maid who protected a millionaire's sick father became more than just a tale of kindness. It became a reminder to everyone that true worth lies not in wealth or beauty, but in the purity of the heart. The mansion, once filled with silent tensions and hidden lies, now echoed with warmth and gratitude, all because one maid had the courage to protect an old man when no one else would. And what happened next was something no one had ever expected. A millionaire's life was transformed forever, not by money or status, but by the simple, selfless love of a maid who had the heart of gold.